Well, it's kind of interesting. We 2 weeks ago in Beersford, when I had a group, a lot of this same question came up, and I'm not in favor of this bill either. I think it's, I'll just leave it at that. I can't say that I have had all the same experiences that Jack had, but I can remember when I received a vaccination for polio back in the late 50s, early 60s. I just don't favor this bill. Thank you.
We have Senator Stalzer and then Representative Sullivan.
Well, like the others, I have some empathy for the people with this. There are maybe some of the vaccines that I might question, but particularly smallpox, polio, some of those. I had classmates with polio that to this day have break. So I just cannot support this version of this bill.
Right, Representative Sullivan, and just remember, close to the mic.
Close to the mic. All right. Hopefully you can hear me. So House Bill 1235. This bill is, I vehemently oppose this bill. I will 100% be voting against this bill. This is a public safety issue. This is not good for South Dakota. And it is being kind of framed as a personal freedom bill. This is, when it comes to our children and our citizens, this is not about personal freedom. This is about public health. I will be absolutely voting against this bill.
All right, we are going to go to Representative Steele and then Representative Saba.
Thank you. This bill is probably the one that I've gotten more responses on than any other bill. It is probably 20, at least 30 to 1 in favor of having this bill from parents that I've heard from that are concerned about their children. Now, I can't, as Representative Colbeck, Senator Colbeck, Senator Colbeck said, when I was young, we feared polio. We were so excited to be able to go down and get the shot for polio to eliminate that. Same way, I was 8 of us in our families, the measles, the mumps, the chicken pox, we just took turns going through the whole thing. The pharmaceutical industry has eliminated those things, and I'm so thankful that they have. But in 1986, the federal government gave full, free protection against being sued. And now we have 75 plus different shots from the pharmaceutical company for our little kids. And they start getting shots before they even get out of the hospital. And the responses I've gotten from parents have been overwhelming. There needs to be some additional research. There needs to be some additional testing on the drugs that we've got coming out of the pharmaceutical industry.
Thank you,
children.
Representative Steele. Representative Saba.
What Representative Steele said is the kind of dilemma that we're put in our positions, because I have also received overwhelming support for this bill. How representative that is of my own constituents or the constituents of the states is another issue. My daughter even supported this concept, as well as my granddaughter, but I don't represent them. I don't represent my daughter. I represent the public. And I've worked very closely in the health business the last many years was at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, and then here with both Sanford and Avera. And the American Society of Pediatricians and all the major organizations are, as Representative Sullivan said, they're also vehemently opposed to this bill for what it means to the public. So I oppose this bill also.
Thank you. So next, I'm going to move on to a couple of questions around some of the scope of healthcare providers, I guess is what I would call it. Senate Bill 109. I am not sure if this has had a hearing yet. It says, where do you stand on Senate Bill 109, which is provide protections for healthcare decisions governed by conscience? There's another bill that has some similarities, House Bill 1167, which is about school counselors, social workers, and their professional ethics, and how that might impact mental health services. So since I have so many topics coming forward, I'm kind of throwing those two together. So Senate Bill 109, House Bill 1167. Senator Stalzer.
Senate Bill 109 is the one I have some knowledge of. It is actually going to be tabled on Monday. It's good. There's good intentions. There are some issues that need to be worked out, and it's going to be tabled and relooked at over the summer, and work with some of the organizations that have issues with it.
Right, well, that answers that one. Anybody want to take on 1167, House Bill 1167, the school council?
I can't comment on that bill because I haven't even looked at it. So, leave it at that.
Yeah, Representative Sullivan?
Yes, so House Bill 1167 is in regards to students and their school counselors. And this bill is basically saying that a school counselor would be able to tell the parents of a student if they gave certain information. For example, if a student came to a counselor's office and was perhaps struggling with their gender identity, and they went to their school counselor and really needed to talk it out with somebody that they trusted, and that school counselor would then have the right and privilege to tell the parents about what that student is talking about in confidence with that counselor. I absolutely oppose this bill. This is not good for our students. It will leave a lack of trust with our students and their counselors. And when there are kids struggling with issues, they need to have somebody that they can go and talk to. And this bill would make it so that they perhaps won't trust that person, because not every kid wants to tell their parent everything that's going on. There's so many different kinds of situations, and that is why we have school counselors, to be there for our students. So I absolutely oppose this bill. I will not be voting for it. I don't think it is good. And when it comes to Senate Bill 109, I know that Senator Salzer said it would be tabled, but I know that it's an issue that
Thank you.
I oppose that bill 100% as well.
Senator Colbeck?
Thanks for the question on this House Bill 1167. I can remember back in my days when, you'd go in and talk to a counselor or a priest or whoever it was, and you might tell them something that wanted all confidence, and maybe you just were asking for a little advice, or maybe asking just for some things that might straighten your mind out a little bit without it going any farther than the room that you were sitting in. So I don't agree with this bill, and I guess we'll see what happens when it gets voted on the floor of the House and gets over to the Senate. Thank you.
Representative Steele?
I just lean towards parents being informed on what's happening to their kids at school. So I have a tendency to lean that way, but the responses that I've gotten from the people, from my constituents, has been strongly in favor of not passing this bill. I voted for it in committee. I will certainly have to take a closer look at it because of my response from the people in my district.
Right, Representative Saba?
I think one thing we have to be all concerned about, and we in the legislature have seen this come up a number of times now, is the legality of some of these things. We've already had issues that we've passed, the whole legislature has passed, and then they have been questioned as to freedom of speech, American Civil Liberties Union, and we've had to pay large amounts of money to fight these issues, and then when we've lost, it's upwards of $200,000. So this might very much be a legal issue in terms of a psychologist being asked to pass on information, as a physician, also being asked to pass on information. So we have to be very careful about that.
All right, thank you. We're going to have one more question relative to some of the healthcare issues, and then we will move on to one of the biggest topics that I have before me, and that is some of the education bills and education funding. So But this question is around House Bill 1096, the surrogacy bill. And so I know that this is a bill that has had some amendment to it. So multiple questions on this. What are your thoughts on the bill? And if you do support it, why? And then are you in support of the summer study that has been discussed? So kind of combining some questions around House Bill 1096 around surrogacy. Senator Colbeck.
Yeah, this has been a big topic on the surrogacy thing. And again, I go back to experiences with situations like this here, but I have made the suggestion that we go to a summer study with this bill. There's a lot of things involved in here. First of all, there's contracts that are involved between the surrogate mother and the parents or the people that want to have that surrogate mother have that child. Now, these contracts can be between a lawyer and a parent or however they work. There's also so-called brokers supposedly involved in this surrogacy thing that we have heard. That there's a couple in the state of South Dakota that we're dealing with as well. But I think it's such a touchy issue and such a subject that affects, a few people, but yet they're very important people. People that want to have children, but yet aren't able to have them naturally themselves. So I think a good summer study on this here would bring out some of those aspects of this bill that would make it better and for everybody involved. And I really respect the representative from Del Rapids, John Hanson, for bringing this bill because it really brought forth a lot of information to everybody involved. And I don't know what's going to happen with it in the committee over in the Senate yet and all that, but that would be my recommendation with it. And I'll pass it on to somebody else. Thank you.
All right, so we are going to go to Senator Stalzer and then Representative Steele.
I met with some of the people that brought this bill before session. I have not, since it's in the House side, seen much of it this year. The original intent was primarily for foreign surrogacy, coming in and paying, and then getting 4 or 5 mothers when they get what they want through DNA testing and so on, then they ask that the others be aborted. And that was the original intent, but it is getting into our local citizens and so on from what I understand. So I think this one probably does need a step back and some study on it, how you separate those two issues and allow the South Dakota citizen to have their family, but yet prevent this international.
Representative Steele.
Thank you. I agree with the ones who have already spoke as far as we need to do some more research on this. There's both two sides to this thing, and being I lean towards concerned with the economy. It's a business that we have that adds to the economy and the individual right of the person. Yet the response that I've gotten from the people have been 2-to-1 opposed to this bill. And one of the things they look at is these babies are used, and they look at it as a commodity, something that's for sale. And this is the individuals that think along this line are extremely concerned about this fact that we're belittling the life of these little ones in the sense that we're using them as a commodity. And so we need to do more research on this.
Thank you. Representative Sullivan and then Representative Saba.
Thank you, Betty. I opposed this bill when it was heard on the House floor, and I spoke out against it. When we talk about, the abortion factor, which is actually in these cases is called fetal reduction, that doesn't happen anymore. That hasn't happened in our state in years. Because when we are talking about surrogacy, there's only, one or two at the most, but generally speaking, 1 or 2 embryos that is implanted because fortunately our medical technology has brought us to a point where you don't need to be putting, 5, 6, 10 embryos into a woman's body. So fetal reduction does not happen, and this is not an issue with surrogacy. And when it comes to, talking about surrogacy agencies as brokers, they are more like caseworkers. This is not about buying and selling children any more than adoption is about buying and selling children. It is my opinion that when we talk about things in that way, it is sensationalism. It is trying to get people to look at something in a perspective that is not actually reality, and it's a misrepresentation of the issue. I absolutely think that we need to study this, and we need to put some regulations in place to make surrogacy safe for the families in our state.
Thank you. Representative Saba, and then Senator Bolin.
My concern with bills like this is, as was pointed out by Representative Sullivan, these are rare situations, relatively speaking, in the state. And sometimes we are told they're misrepresented. But let's say we do send it for summer study, that costs money. Every time we come back together to look at something, with bringing the legislators in to do it, and the time and effort on the part of the legislative research staff, that's costing money. That's taxpayers' money. So we have to be careful when we introduce bills. Even if, they are bills that make some sense to the person who introduced them, if it's going to cost the state more money, we have to really watch that.
Senator
Thank you.
Bolin.
If I could just comment on Representative Saba's comments. The legislature is going to authorize 2, at the most 3 summer studies. They do that every year. Question will be whether this will be one of those 2 or 3 studies. The other thing I'd like to point out about this is that this it's quite interesting, is that this is an area where there are no federal guidelines on this. Every state handles it differently. I've done a very little bit of reading about this. One thing I did find out is that, for instance, a state like Michigan has very strict laws against surrogacy. Can't operate there. Not generally known as a hotbed of social conservative values. Other states have no regulations, like South Dakota. So it's a very delicate subject, and perhaps a summer study would be best. But again, the legislature, in its budget for year after year after year, has always had 2 or 3 summer studies. So we'll not be increasing our budget to perhaps study this particular subject. And that's my other concern, is that as a member of the E-Board, the executive board of the legislature that meets during the summer and fall, we're generally the ones that pick the summer studies, and we don't like the full legislature telling us which ones are going to be chosen. So could be a little bit of conflict there. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Senator Bolin. We are going to move into questions around education, and we've got a variety of topics, but I've got a whole handful of questions around Senate Bill 117, which is the deaf education bill, and House Bill 1228, which is also related. So I'm going to kind of phrase several of these together. So our deaf and hard of hearing children continue to fall through the cracks. There's opposition to this bill because of funding, but what is your stance? And then I think one of the bills is about maybe a Bill of Rights for our students who are deaf or hard of hearing. And so Senate Bill 117, House Bill 1228, what is your stance on these bills?
I'll just mention
Senator
very
Bowen?
briefly, this bill was passed out of the Senate Ed Committee. It was referred for a fiscal note, and I understand it's in appropriations now. So I'll leave it at that. I don't necessarily favor somehow, quote, Bill of Rights for any particular circumstance or situation. I don't think that would be wise, because then we're starting to go down a path of who knows where.
Representative Sullivan?
Thank you. So I will be supporting both of these bills. And in Senate Bill 117, which I haven't seen come through yet, really the change that was made, it says the Department of Education shall establish a program and policy to So it says, it changes it from may to shall, so that we are making sure that we are taking care of our deaf and hard of hearing kids, hearing, excuse me. So these are good bills. We need to be taking care of populations that need us to take care of them, and these are those populations. So I will be supporting both of these bills. And as far as, and I'm not on education committee, so I haven't heard testimony on either of these bills. I'm just looking at them right now, but 1228 is expanding the criteria for education for our deaf and hard of hearing children, and that is a good thing. So I will be supporting these bills.
Senator Colbeck.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody that's involved with our deaf community. As you guys all know, there's a lot of history behind the deaf community in our state, and stems back all the way from School for the Deaf, when the School for the Deaf was sold, and we, Department of Ed, took the money and went and bought a building over there in the Meadows, as we call it, here in Sioux Falls, and started up the School for the Deaf over there. I requested a tour of that building this summer to be brought forth by the Department of Ed for the legislators and the community to tour that building. And in my own respect, I would say that that's not a school, but they do hold some, classes there with the parents and the children that are coming into the system that are deaf or hard of hearing. I signed on to Senate Bill 117 because of my passion for the deaf community. We are taking this into appropriations. We have met with the Department of Ed. Again, I'm on that work group to work with them to try to get some funding or try to figure something out as to what we can do to make it better for our deaf community. They service around the state of South Dakota, and these are not not all, this number I'm giving you is 560 people that are underneath the School for the Deaf. Now, not all of those require extreme care. Some are out on their own, but they're still underneath that auspices of the School for the Deaf. That's 560 children or young adults. And inside that School for the Deaf, there's 12 providers that work with those 560, and those 560 are throughout the state of South Dakota. So if you can imagine getting in a car in the morning and driving to Winter and then maybe to Chamberlain to help out those deaf students, it takes a while. So anyway, we are working
Senator
on
Colbeck.
it, and I will go from there. Thank you.
Representative Steele.
Thank you. It is an important topic, and I was disappointed with the Board of Regents when they shut down the deaf school on the east side of town. I was extremely upset with them at that time because to me it appeared they totally abandoned our deaf group. And so I've toured the new building on the west side. It's an excellent opportunity. Most of those people that are in that situation, they don't want handouts. They want hand-ups. They want to be able to, I've worked with some of them, and they're neat people that just want to be able to make a living like the rest of us. And I think this new position, new activities that they've got going, I look forward to the bill because I'm in education. It'll be coming to education probably this next week. I look forward to taking a closer look at it, and I have a very positive view to the whole situation. Thank you.
Seeing anyone else, so we'll move to the next question. And just to give everybody a heads up, when we're finished with these around pre-K kindergarten, then we will move on to education funding. So a little warning as to what's coming up next. So lots of questions coming in around House Bill 1237, which is to establish the Early Learning Council to determine needs for early childhood education in the state. And then also bills around, I got two different numbers here, House Bill 1174 and House Bill 1218, that are around, appears a new start date for kindergarten. And so a couple of areas addressing early childhood education. So House Bill 1237 and kindergarten start date. Here's on those. Senator Boland.
I don't know much about the kindergarten start date, but I will comment on 1237, which we'll see if it comes through the House. I'll be opposing that bill, and here's my reason for it. There's a lot of work, and individual school districts are doing a lot of work on this subject right now in the state of South Dakota. One of the school districts I represent is Alcester-Hudson, and they have a program which they really like and which has benefited their school district. And it really comes down to 6 words. It comes down to locally organized, locally managed, locally funded. And my personal view is this, is if Alcester-Hudson can run a pre-K program that they like, which they fund, which they organize, which they manage, Sioux Falls can too. So I'll just leave it at that.
Senator Stalzer.
I think particularly early childhood, I'll repeat what I said a year ago. We are still not funding our community support providers adequately. We're really struggling to come up with money just to keep our commitments to our teachers. And as Senator Boland said, if local communities want to do pre-K, that's fine. But right now, the chair of our appropriations committee at his Cracker Barrel last week asked how many people were willing to have their taxes raised to pay for it, and no one said they were willing to raise taxes. We're really trying to do the best we can with the limited resources we have available, and at this time, we have things that I think are bigger priorities.
Representative Saba.
Education is unfortunately not put at the priority rate that it should be, I think, in the state and really in the nation. But we start with a situation where 49% of our budget goes to education already in South Dakota. And Senator Colbeck and myself, being on appropriations, we have this dilemma of balancing a budget, already putting a lot of money out on education, and where do we stop? Where do we add? Well, my position is I'm going to support these education bills because I think they are not considered with the priorities that they need to be considered with in our society. We dominionize the importance of education. When we, for example, say, well, who wants to raise property taxes? Well, that's one way of looking at it. But another way is going back into appropriations and saying, where can we cut some of budget funds that we're spending, because we're going to have to do that to be able to pay for these programs. And can we do that and then add that to education? I would in many cases say add it to education because we need to put that at a higher priority.
Representative Sullivan.
Thank you. Early learning is so vital to our children, to our communities. 74% of families in South Dakota are working families with both parents working outside of the home. This bill is to establish an early learning advisory council so that we can study and figure out the best way to make sure that our kids are getting educated utilizing public and private partnerships. And when it comes to this bill and this early learning advisory council, this council would cost less than $20,000. And we just passed a bill in the House this week regarding a Sentinel program, which would mean that our teachers would be allowed to carry guns, and that they want to, the bill that was passed would would cost $45,000 for a training program for Sentinels in our state, $45,000. And not to mention, that is public record and open record. So anyone would be able to see who has those guns and what schools and what teachers. That is dangerous. And we're going to spend $45,000, yet we can't spend less than $20,000 to study early learning. I mean, when we talk about early learning, this continues on for the rest of that child's life. We are trying to get these kids to graduate from high school and be successful and not get into trouble, not go to prison or get into trouble with drugs. Early learning is so vital. It needs to be supported by our state. Thank you.
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you for the question. I'll just give you a little bit of history. we in the appropriations, and Representative Saba and I are there, we fund education. That's what we do. We fund education. Education money goes down to the local level. And that's your school district. Now, your school district at that point in time has the authority to spend that money the way they want to spend. That can be for teacher salary, that can be for pre-K education, that can be for whatever they want to do it for. So the history lesson here I want to tell you today is vote, go out and vote for your district, your school district representatives. We had a 4.4%. That's who voted for our last two school district or board directors. We had a bond issue of $190 million. 3.8% of our population voted for that. That's where the money, we bring the money, Representative Saba and I, we can get the money down to the district. But the districts need to decide that, and that leadership are the ones that do that. I highly recommend that, when there is a bond issue or a school district election, get out and vote and voice your opinion at that point. We have so much money that we are allotted to. We have a state constitution that says that we have a balanced budget. We do our best as we can.
Thank you,
get
Senator
that.
Colbeck.
Thank you.
All right. So as I indicated, the next area of questions coming in is around education funding. And in general, is revenue available in the budget this year for an increase for education funding? And then with that has come the follow-up question of what about state employees and community service providers? So we're blessed to have two appropriators with us, and I'm sure everyone has an opinion on this one. So increases for education? There's no bill on it. It's just in terms of appropriations and whether or not, or no, they didn't provide the bill number. It'd be the general approps bill. 1290 something. So basically, where are we at in terms of support for an increase above the governor's recommended budget for teachers, providers, state employees?
Okay, thank you again. I'll try to handle this as best possible. I might have got myself in trouble on the last one. Just to let everybody know that we are looking better. We're working on it. We're going to get some final numbers this week again on the budget. And as you know, the governor on December 3rd kind of not dictated down, but kind of said where we were at. Well, our revenue numbers are better. That's what I can tell you that at this point in time. If we wanted to fund the education, the state employees, and the care providers all in one bundle, we would need approximately $34 million more dollars. Now, we're not going to get to that, probably that $34 million, but we're going to get to a little bit better than the zero. I can't guarantee exactly what that'll be. I can't guarantee if there'll be a lot there. But again, we go back to the thing that we got a state constitution that our budget that has to be balanced. We are looking at a lot of different things where we can make some cuts, save some money, save some FTEs, et cetera, on down the line, and try to get to that. But I just ask the public to bear with us on that, because we are working very, very hard on that. And Representative Saba, you can kick in on it, because you know as well as how hard we're working on all of that. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Representative Saba.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the nice things about being on appropriations is it tends to be a apolitical committee. We have a limited amount of money. We have to balance the budget, and whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you better work hard to make that happen. We have limitations of how much revenue we have coming in, as Senator Colbeck has said. So we need to do things on that committee to try to shift things around and look where there's more revenue than we thought, et cetera. And I will say this, on that committee, there's a strong support for that education increase to move it up to where it is at a reasonable level for what the needs are in education, and that's across the board. At the same time, I ditto my other remarks that I just had said, and that's that we as a society don't put a high enough priority on education. I've lived and taught in other countries, and doctors' salaries in some other countries and teachers' salaries are very similar. We have such a gap with our teachers in terms of the salaries that they receive. and the amount of money that we put forth for education. So we need to look at, I think, in a bigger picture of reprioritizing that issue.
All right, we are going to go to Senator Stalzer and then to Representative Steele.
Yes, one of the things that has not come up about the funding for education, the federal government in its infinite wisdom decided this year that we can no longer tax your internet connection. In other words, your Midco or your Vast or Comcast or whoever you use. And that cut $20 million out of our budget. And that's probably the biggest thing behind us struggling to come up with money. The other thing is, after the half-cent sales tax, we actually fund education 32nd out of the 50 states. Our teachers are rapidly getting back down to 49, but our administrators are all the way up to 15. Someone needs to take a really hard look from the administration of where they're spending this money. And we also have to take a hard look at consolidation across the state. Instead of 2 counties with schools 15 miles apart, each paying 6 figures for a superintendent and a principal and some of the other services, if we're going to really solve this problem, we're going to have to consolidate some of these and get those administrators handling more than just 1 or 2 schools.
Thank you. Representative Steele.
Thank you. We're fortunate enough to have the 2 appropriators on from each side here, and I appreciate their input. They're the ones that give us the information that we're able to evaluate, because when this is all over with in March, we'll have to make that final decision. The money that is received to the individual schools is decided by the local school. What do you want to pay your administrators? What do you want to pay your teachers? I think there needs to be some evaluation done on what each one of those categories are paid. And it's a good point on consolidation. There's no sense in having what we have out there for the individual schools scattered around and what we pay for those. There's a lot of money there that could be better utilized. That's one of the directions we need to be working on.
Representative Sullivan.
Thank you. So I am not an appropriator, and I do have an incredible amount of respect for our appropriators because they have an incredibly difficult and taxing job. And I do appreciate the work that they do, and I know that they are working on funding education. But a few years ago, we did pass a bill that we would increase teacher pay by 3% or the rate of inflation, and we're not doing that. We're not holding ourselves accountable as legislators, as the legislature. And to me, that's not okay. We said we were going to do that, so we need to do it. Our teachers are the future for our children. I mean, they are teaching our children everything that they need to learn to move forward and to be positive members of society. And they work really hard. And we have teachers that are leaving our state because they can't afford to live here. We need to keep people in our state, and we need to support our teachers and our education. But education is the most important thing in our entire state. It helps people become members of society that are contributing and are getting good jobs and are contributing to our economic development. Education is the key to success in our state. And I don't know why it is not the #1 priority.
Thank you. Senator Boland.
Yeah,
Please.
I'll chat on that. I was a teacher for 32 years. I spent most of that time in Canton. So I can relate to some of the things that Representative Sullivan said. Just to clarify, however, the point she made at the very beginning about the 3%, that is the money that goes to school districts for their choice. That was during when Bill Janklow in the middle 1990s revised the school funding formula. The 3% is not necessarily guaranteed to teachers. That's what's done by the individual school district. It's the 3% or inflation, whichever is less, that goes to the individual school district, and then they make the decision as to teacher pay and those type of things. So I wanted to make sure that's clarified. Education, extremely important. We have to use each dollar wisely, and we have many, many needs as far as state employees and our community support providers, and everybody needs to understand that we can fund all this stuff with another tax increase. I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you. Well, we're going to stay on the money topic a little bit. This question is related to Senate Bill 2, the statewide 211 bill. So do you support funding the 211 helpline statewide? Currently, this is paid for half by counties, and some counties can't afford it. So statewide 211, Senate Bill 2. Senator Stalzer.
Okay, that's my bill. Last year, I went to the legislature asking for this funding. I got half of it. We are now up to a little over half of our counties, 34, I believe, of the 66, are now participating with the county paying half and the state paying half. We were at 16 a year ago when the county had to pay all of it. So we were back in Senate appropriations on Friday. They have approved the funding for this, which is about $400,000 ongoing. So in the realm of a $4.4 billion budget, it's pretty small. But this is our suicide hotline. For those of you who went through the tornado here, I have two widow ladies living each side of me. I was recovering from open heart surgery, so I couldn't get my chainsaw out and help them, but they called the helpline, and within hours had people volunteering who had called and signed up out with their chainsaws, cutting their branches up, hauling them out, taking care of them. So this is a service we do have in Minnehaha County, and we would like to get that statewide. It initially came out of a mental health study 2 years ago, a panel I was on, and I say we got halfway there last year, now we're trying to get through.
Right, we are going to go in the order of Senator Colbeck, Representative Sullivan, and then Representative Steele.
Thank you. 211 is very important, and is very important for our state, and is, I'm not going to repeat what that Jim Stalzer said, but there was one no vote in the Senate. We passed this through on Friday with the appropriations of $375,000 ongoing, so we can get every county that we possibly can get on the line. We've had 8 counties since October join the 211 hotline. And if anybody has ever used the 211 hotline, I highly recommend that if you ever have to use it, you've got some remarkable people on the end of that line. It's a very short window when somebody calls 211 that has a mental health problem or is talking suicide or whatever. It's a very short window. And whether that person lives up in Harding County or in Minnehaha County, that person on the end of that line, that voice, whether 2 or 3 minutes is all they get to talk to that person that's having an issue, that is very, very critical, that short period of time. And I was very supportive of this, and I was really, I was glad that Senator Stalzer brought it, and hopefully we continue on. Thank you.
Representative Sullivan.
Thank you. I want to commend Senator Stalzer for his work on this because it is so important to have that resource, especially in our rural communities. Our rural communities where people don't necessarily have easy access to mental health, and so mental health services. So I absolutely support this. I think it is an excellent service. I would love to see it go completely statewide so that every citizen of South Dakota has access to utilizing 211.
Thank you. Representative Steele.
Haven't seen this bill before, so just reviewing it now and reading it, the Department of Social Services did read, may cooperate with and support the counties in development maintenance. The key word, it's amazing how one word can make that much difference. This one says the Department of Social Services shall cooperate. Big difference there. This is what needs to be done. They should have been cooperating to start with. So I can see this as a very positive bill, and I look forward to receiving it in the House.
This comment, I support this bill as well.
And then Representative Saba.
Yeah, again, I think it's an excellent bill, but just a note of caution. As we become more and more dependent on electronic aspects of dealing with people, I think we lose, we have the personal touch on that line, but we can't forget the person-to-person contact that's necessary also.
Great, thank you. So moving on, this is in regard to Senate Bill 113. It's a distracted driving bill. Do you support the distracted driving bill? Senate Bill 113. All right, Senator Colbeck, thank you.
I voted no on this bill in the Senate. And the reason I voted no on it was they wanted to extend the parents being with a 14-year-old from 6 months to 9 months. Last year they brought this bill and they wanted to extend it to 12 months. This year they come back to shorten it to 9 months, where a 14-year-old would need to be with a parent or guardian in order to drive during the certain hours. And as you all know, 14-year-olds are eligible to drive with a work permit. We have a workforce shortage. We hear workforce all the time. Students get out of class in the afternoon at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3:30, whatever it may be, and that 14-year-old may be able to go to work. He might be able to go to Hy-Vee. They can work up to 20 hours a week, believe it or not, if you read what the South Dakota labor laws are. So I was opposed to this bill because I don't disagree with that a young adult should be with a parent for up to 6 months. I don't disagree with that. I think after that, they're comparable enough to work or drive a vehicle, and they could get themselves to work in the afternoons if they're not participating in sports or other activities. And I did oppose this bill, and somebody else can take it from there.
Senator Bolin.
Thank you. Well, on this one, I happen to disagree with my good friend Senator Colbeck. I did support this bill. Thank you.
Representative Sullivan.
Yeah, so this is actually the first time I'm seeing this bill, but I do remember it from last year. And I appreciate Senator Colbeck's comments on, workforce, and we need kids to be able to get to school. I think if this bill was amended where a kid could still, get to work by themselves, but then any other time they would be with a parent, I think that potentially could be okay. But I do know that 6 months is not very long to be learning how to drive. And I just recently had a friend whose son passed away in a car accident, and he was 16 years old. And I think that having the responsibility, driving is a massive responsibility, and you can affect so many other people. So I would have to really look at this bill to say whether I would support it or oppose it. But the idea of extending the permit for kids, I think I would support.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to Senate Bill 96, prohibiting or addressing denial of benefits. So what is your position on lifetime denial of benefits based solely on a controlled substance felony? And I think that might be in regard to TANF benefits. Senator Salzer.
That is in regard to TANF benefits. We heard that in Judiciary Committee this week. It was brought by Senator Nessebar. And quite honestly, I first thought I would be opposing this bill. But after hearing the testimony on it, it basically impacts about 10 families a month. And it's $65 extra, because right now the whole family can be on TANF, but the person with the drug felony cannot be counted in the house. So we're basically looking at maybe $650 a month, and that can be critical to some of these families, with low-income families with the dependent children. So it pretty well got out of committee unanimously after most of us thinking this was going to cost millions. It's very, very low number of people, and it can be a very big help to them. Yeah, I did support.
Senator Bolin.
Well, thank you. I want to applaud Senator Nessa, but I don't think he's here today, for bringing this bill, and I'll be supporting this bill as well in its current form, as long as it's not amended. I think it's very reasonable approach, and again, I'll give my personal kudos for him for bringing the bill. Thank you.
Representative Sullivan.
I will absolutely be supporting this bill. We need to be helping our folks that have felonies. We need to be helping them, not hurting them. When you are able to get back on your feet after you've served a sentence, you're less likely to go back. The recidivism rates go down. So I think this is an excellent bill. It hasn't come through the House yet, but this is definitely necessary, and I appreciate the sponsors of the bill, and I support it.
All right, we'll move to a different topic then. This is in regard to House Joint Resolution 5002 regarding a redistricting commission. What will be your vote, or what is your stance on this resolution? House Joint Resolution 5002 on redistricting. Senator Bolin.
Well, thank you. I figured this question was going to come. I'll be opposing this bill, this joint resolution. This is very similar to a proposal that was put before the voters in 2016, and that proposal was defeated in a landslide. About 43% of the people voted yes, 57% of the people voted no. In my political science classes, that qualifies as a landslide. The proposal that is out there today, that's going to be debated in the House this next week, or in the House committee, it's actually even more dangerous, I believe, than the proposal that was defeated by the public in 2016, because it basically puts all this power into 5 people. 4 of them are designed to be partisan, and only one person will make the final decision. So I will be aggressively opposing this proposal. I was on the commission that did the committee did the work in 2011. No lawsuits been brought against this current proposal, even though there's been lawsuits in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Maryland, all across the country. So let's follow the will of the people, and I'll be working aggressively to defeat this measure. Thank you.
Representative Steele.
Just added to say I agree with Senator Bolin. I think that the people have spoken, so let's go on.
Representative Sullivan.
Thank you. So the people spoke, yes, 4 years ago, and a lot has changed politically in that time. The way that it works now, having the legislative body be working on redistricting, isn't that a conflict of interest? I would say that it is. I think that I haven't gone through this entire resolution line by line, but there is a clear issue with balance in our legislature. There are 11 Democrats in the House out of 70, so 11 to 59, and there are only 5 Democratic senators out of 35 in the Senate. And I think we all know that that does not reflect what our state is or the people of our state. And so we need to figure out a way to redistrict that is going to be more reflective of the South Dakota citizens. So I will absolutely be supporting this House Joint Resolution.
Anyone else on this topic before we move on? All right. So we've heard workforce mentioned, and there are actually multiple bills around some changes in professional licensure this year, but this is in specific regard to House Bill 1276, which provides for a review of some of the occupational regulations. The question is, what is the true intent behind the bill, and will it maintain the high level of public health and safety associated with currently licensed professionals? And does this bill eliminate licensure requirements? House Bill 1276 on professional licensure. Senator Bolin.
Yeah, thank you. I've been contacted by a number of people in my district about this proposal. It's similar, not exactly the same, it's similar to a proposal that was brought by Governor Dugard back in, I think it was 17 or 18, before the last election for governor, and it was defeated then, and I'm very skeptical of this bill. I have some real doubts about it, so I'll leave it at that. I think it potentially could impact public health and safety.
1276. Representative Sullivan.
This is a really long bill that I have not seen yet, so I didn't want to just sit silently. At this point, I'm neutral because I haven't looked at it. But if whoever asked the question, if you want to come talk to me at the end of this, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on it.
Senator Colbeck.
Well, I'm going to, on behalf of myself and Representative Sabo over there, being an appropriations, I haven't seen this bill. I will be, we're reading it now, but I'll have to take a look at it, but I don't know about it right now.
Senator Stalzer.
I assume, since it's a House bill and it hasn't gotten to the Senate, but Arizona last year just approved where they will accept the certification from any other state for almost any license. The bill that we had a few years ago was defeated primarily because of some of the medical profession. And we participate in compacts for nurses and doctors where they all meet the same requirements, and so that the licenses are transferable across those states. But there are states that don't participate in that, and this would some of these things would open that up. And the reason the previous one was killed was because of these professions that belonged to compacts and wanted to maintain high standards. It was defeated, and I'm guessing this one might be headed the same way. We did just approve physical therapists in the Senate being able to join a nationwide compact to make that licensing go across state lines. But I know I was at the White House a couple years ago and they made this a priority, but it has to be something that really works and does protect everyone.
Great. We're going to try to get in at least one more, maybe two more questions. So this question is around House Bill 1117. It's being referred to as the riot boosting bill. And so there have been a couple of different questions on that, but in general, it's kind of what is your stance on this, and questioning whether or not it would be unconstitutional in its intended effect. House Bill 1117. Representative Saba.
Well, this is an example of something I referred to previously. The previous bill last year that was passed by the legislature was declared unconstitutional, and in that declaration, it was pretty clear that that free speech was being violated. And again, I think the bill, as I've heard it, cost us $180,000 or probably more. And this bill is likely to also bring forth a constitutional issue, and we're very likely to be sued again. And sometimes the logic in the legislature, I don't quite understand, because one person, when this was being debated, said, well, even if we have to pay $180,000, up in North Dakota, they ended up paying $35 million to clean up when the riots took place, and therefore it's justified in paying $180,000 to test it. I don't agree with that logic. And if you heard the Native American testimony, both from the legislators we had, and then some of the Native Americans that came to the hearing, it was really compelling. That one of the legislators said, a few years ago there was something called the War Party Bill, or the War Party Law, where if three Native Americans are together and they might be talking about various things that people don't like, they can be declared a war party and arrested accordingly and put in jail. This is much like this. And I think we should really listen
Thank
to
you,
them more
Senator.
carefully. Thank you.
We're going to go Representative Steele and then Senator Stalzer.
Much as I respect Senator Saba, or Representative Saba, I totally disagree with him on that last statement. This bill is aimed at, and it's been tweaked because it did go to a lawsuit last year. That's why the governor took it back and said, we need to have something stated when they're out there rioting and there's shots being fired, cars being turned over, being burned. We got a problem. When you have a riot, and that's what this is trying to address, when you have a riot where these things happen, they need to be addressed. Now, I believe in peaceful protest, and that is our right. And anyone, of whether they're the Native American, whether they're anybody else, has the right to do that. And I would fight for the right to do that. But when it goes to the extreme that this is addressing, we're talking about rioting. We're not talking about protesting. And this is what this is trying to address on what we had happen last year and what has happened in North Dakota. So hopefully this will help solve some of that.
Senator Stalzer.
Okay. Again, being in the Senate, I haven't seen the full language on this, but the main thing I want to point out is that the primary reason this was found unconstitutional is it depended on a section of South Dakota law that's been in place since 1930. And that's what was found unconstitutional. So the new bill is working on that portion. And we'll see what comes out of it, but the main thing is going to be a new definition in that section.
Representative Sullivan.
Thank you, Betty. So this bill came through the House, and I spoke out against it and voted against this bill. When it was a bad bill last year, and it's a bad bill this year. This bill directly was targeting our Native American population, and I know that it has been tweaked, and it's not as bad as it was last year. However, this bill is going to stifle free speech, and I appreciate the former representatives that spoke on it and agree with, our right to free speech and protesting. However, this is a bill that is going to incite fear in people, especially our Native American populations who are already discriminated against in this state. This is not a good bill. I'm not a fan of this bill. I vehemently oppose it, and it will stifle free speech. It will stifle activists protesting. This is not a good bill for South Dakota, and we should not be directly targeting our Native American population, which is exactly what this bill is doing.
Nope. All right, one more question we're going to tweak in here. This is about Senate Bill 66, the charter school bill. This has been amended and changed charter to community schools. The questioner is saying that this bill would divert public education general funds from local districts. And what is your stance on Senate Bill 66, which is charter or community schools? Senator Boland.
Okay, well, I was really hoping this question was going to come up. Yesterday, it was Friday or this last week, on Thursday Senate Education unanimously passed out, Democrats and Republicans passed out Senate Bill 66. This is a very significant piece of legislation. We have abysmal situation on our reservation, on our reservations across the state in regards to the education of Native American students. This bill has been reworked. There's been extensive negotiation between the Nome administration, the Department of Education, the Native American tribes, Senator Heinert, who's worked on this bill, and we passed this bill out. It's a pilot program that would set up at most 4 what are called community-based schools, which would use culturally appropriate educational techniques and emphasize the Lakota language so that Native American students would hopefully be able to achieve greater success. Some of the worst performing counties in the United States and school districts are here in South Dakota, primarily on our Native American reservations. And we need to take a step forward to try to deal with this. This is a pilot program. We're not sure it's going to work, but myself, along with 6 others, Republicans and Democrats, East River, West River,
Thank you.
said we're going to take this step forward, and I'm supporting it.
Thank you. Representative Steele.
I'm on the Education Committee in the House, as I've mentioned, and I look at and get input from what's happening on this bill on the Senate side. This says that they passed in the Education Committee in the Senate 7-0. To me, that comes to my, I've already got a very positive view on this thing, and I haven't even read it yet. So that's the help we are back and forth, where the Senate and the House does work together on giving advice back and forth indirectly. And it's given me some positive, I'll look it through, and at this point, I feel very positive about it.
Representative Steba.
Yeah, I'm real fortunate. I live in a house close to the Capitol. It's sort of a bed and breakfast place, but we have Democrats and Republicans. There's 6 of us, Democrats and Republicans, men and women, and non-natives and natives. So we get into really interesting discussions every night with a mix like that. And as you've heard, sometimes, these Senate bills, we don't hear much about them until they come to us. And the same thing is true of the people in the House, not hearing, or people in the Senate not hearing about our bills. So it's really valuable. But in that House with the, and we have 1 Democrat, Native American, and 1 Republican Native American. So it gives some very interesting discussions. I completely support this because this is the opposite, I think, of a kind of bill from the bill that we just talked about, where we're responding as a state positively to the need of the Native Americans, a bill they initiated, and I'm really glad to hear the great support we have across the board here for it.
Representative Sullivan.
Thank you. So I think the original question was kind of asking if this is going to be taking away money from public schools, and I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know, I wouldn't normally support taking education funding and giving it to charter schools. However, this is in regards to our Native American population, and I think it was Senator Bolin that said we have the poorest counties on our reservations in the country. And so if we can do anything to assist our Native American population in being successful and getting them those reservations out of the terrible conditions that some of them are in certain places, I am absolutely in support of that. I know that Senator Heiner worked really hard on this and has been working really hard on it. And as Senator Bolin said, this is a pilot program, so we'll have to see how it goes. But I am fully in support of this bill, and I will be voting yes on it when it comes to the House.
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, and I commend the sponsors, and I sit in the Senate, I sit kind of in front of Senator Heiner, who brought this bill, and I'm learning a little bit more and more of the Lakota language all the time. And there are grants out there too, as well, as Representative Sullivan alluded to, costing money out of our educational fund and charter schools. There is grants out there from the federal government, Bush grants, that we are actually, I've suggested to Senator Heinert, and they're looking into that as well. That may help pilot this program, and I think it's a great program, and I look forward to seeing it come down to the Senate floor. Thank you.
Senator Stalzer.
Thank you. I was one of the authors of the Partners in Education bill that was brought a few years ago. And this year, insurance companies were allowed to put up to $2 million into our fund to allow low-income people to put their children in private schools if they were having trouble in a public school. And we're helping 775 kids this year and gave out 1.3 million in scholarships. And when this came up, Senator Heinrich came to me and said, I want our natives to get involved in this. And we had to tell him, God, they already are. We are giving several $100,000 to students on reservations to be able to attend a better school. And I think this is an extension of that. And it was that program that somewhat brought this idea forward to allow more Native students to have better opportunities.
Well, thank you. And that concludes the questioning portion. You can tell we had a lot of topics we didn't get to, so I am going to run through these quickly. House Bill 1148 on protection orders, a question regarding the bill with ingestion of drugs, but no number on that. House Bill 1196 on the statute of limitations, Senate Bill 157 zoning and permits, House Bill 1226 on referendums, House Bill 1232 on trying to help fund adoptions for kids in foster care, a question on expansion of Medicaid, House Bill 1225 restricting abortion funding, House Bill 1251 regarding the Education and Board of Regents reorganizing, Senate Bill 140, bill related to education for students with disabilities, Senate Bill 72, the needs-based scholarship, Senate Bill 54, the plastic pollution bill, Senate Bill 147, collective bargaining, 1262, electric power, House concurrent resolution 603 on gun safety, House Bill 1278 regarding a dementia coordinator, generic question on the climate crisis, and 1202 regarding sales tax and groceries, I believe is what it says. So lots of topics and questions we did not have time to get to. But with that, we will move on to our closing statements. And for this portion, each legislator does get 90 seconds for their closing statements, and we will start our closing statements on my far right with Representative Sullivan.
Thank you. I am just, as I said before, I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so happy to see so many people here that want to hold their legislators accountable because it's so incredibly important. I'm going to do a little plug for a couple of bills that are coming up next week. The Early Learning Advisory Council bill is being heard in House Education this Monday. So if that is a bill that is important to you, if education is important to you, I would suggest to you that you email the House Education Committee and let them know why you are in support of that bill, because it is a really important piece of legislation that we need to pass. Additionally, I have a bill on felon voting rights that will be heard in House State Affairs on Wednesday. And this bill would make it so a person with a felony conviction, as soon as they get out of prison, they would be eligible to vote. Currently, they have to go through their probation and or parole, as well as pay their restitution and their court fees before they're eligible to vote. And when it comes to those fees and restitution, for some folks, that is not an easy thing to pay, and it can take them a long time to get that paid off. And they've already served their time, and they are trying to become contributing citizens in our society, and they have a right to have a voice in elections. So I, again, just thank you so much for being here. I'll be hanging out after for a little bit if you want to come up and chat with me about anything that didn't get discussed, and stay engaged. Stay engaged with your legislature. Thanks for having me.
Senator Stalzer.
Okay. I guess I'd like to not address bills specifically, but in the newspaper whose name we do not speak, I think is the way one radio announcer says it, and you hear it all over, we're criticized for some of the stupid bills we hear. And I will agree with you, we hear stupid bills. But I work with legislators nationally, and in many states, I, as chairman of the Commerce Committee, can take his bill, put it in my desk drawer, and it never sees the light of day. In South Dakota, every bill must get a hearing and must get a final disposition. And so in defense of those stupid bills that I say, why am I here at this time of day? I could be someplace else. I could be headed home for the weekend. I wouldn't change our procedure for the world because it does guarantee us, no matter what our party, our bill will get a hearing.
Thank you. Representative Saba.
Well, I'm really impressed with this crowd. I mean, when I see the bills that some of us haven't even seen brought forward by the audience, I know that there's some good research being done, and that's the way it should be. You know, democracy is so great to have, you know, the participation of all of you, and where you stand is critical for us. Often we're told, you know, well, vote your conscience. That's not always that easy, because sometimes, as I said, you know, my own family is opposed to this immunization thing that we talked about earlier. And, but my constituents and the general public need it. And so I can't necessarily vote my conscience on something like this. I have to vote the conscience of my constituents and of the public. And that's not always easy, to do something different from what your own head says. But by coming to forums like this and hearing what you all have to say, it is really helpful to see the knowledge and the participation and the concern that you have. So please keep it up. Give us a hard time. We need it.
Representative Steele.
Thank you. As the bill that Representative Sullivan mentioned comes to education on Monday, and I'm in the Education Committee, so I expect to hear from most of you, which is fine. We get back, and all of us do, whether House, Senate, we get back to our apartment, and we can have 50, 60, 70 different emails. I've had, this last week I had one night when I got back, I had 101. But that's what we're there for. We're there to hear from you folks. We're there to get response from you. And I keep tabs of one certain one where it has 19 no's and 1 yeses that I've received. That tells me what the people want. Anyway, I consider it a real honor to be able to represent District 12. And if reelected, I want to serve on education and transportation again. The two committees all committees are important, but I feel these are two critical committees because transportation has to do with our economy. It has to do with our state roads, our interstate, down to 67. Sorry. But it has to do with airplanes, and it has to do with rail lines that are important to our economy. Education is the future of our state. And speak to all of you parents, all of you teachers, bring those kids out. Every day we have kids up in the gallery, and they're so excited to be there. And I enjoy seeing the excitement of these kids looking at the dome for the first time and saying, wow.
Thank
Great.
you.
Bring them out.
Senator Colbeck.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Southeast Area of Tech for having such a great facility for this, and Betty and her group for bringing us here, and the other people up here at the panel. It's been a great experience for me today. I'm just going to tell you that we have a citizenship legislature, and your guys' feedback to us is very, very important, as you've heard here. I'm on the Streamlined Sales Tax National Board, and I go to a couple of meetings, and our Streamlined Sales Tax has helped us with the Wayfair case with our internet sales tax. South Dakota was the leader in that, and we had numerous people that were involved with that. But you know what's exciting about that? When I go to these meetings and they introduce myself and the other two people that are with me, and they introduce us from the state of South Dakota, we get a standing ovation. No other state there, 27 states are there, and nobody gets a standing ovation. We get a standing ovation. People from Indiana, Illinois, California come over and say, how do you guys keep doing it? How do you guys keep balancing a budget? How do you guys keep things rolling in the state of South Dakota as good as you do? And that's because we got a citizenship legislature. It's because of people, you guys out there in the crowd, that today have emailed me a couple different things and have, the other representatives have said. So we appreciate that. Yes, it's hard work. Yes, it takes time away from our families, but that's a sacrifice that myself personally, I enjoy doing, and I just appreciate what you guys do out there for us in the state of South Dakota. So when we go to places, we get standing ovations. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Boland,
Well,
last
thank you.
word.
I'm just glad to be here, kind of filling in as a pinch hitter today for some of the people who couldn't be here. appreciate just the opportunity. Usually when I do these in Canton and Beersford and some of the small towns south of Sioux Falls, there's 15 or 20 people there, and we're just kind of sitting around drinking coffee and eating donuts and just kind of chatting about some of the issues and things before the legislature. So this is, it's very nice to have this in a more formalized manner and much larger crowd, different kinds of questions. One of the issues that we did not talk about today, but is a very big issue, maybe not quite in Sioux Falls, was Senate Bill 157 that Senate passed. Will be changing county zoning rules potentially, and it will, I mean, I think it's been in the news. So that's one issue that we didn't talk about today, and it'll be, if I was in Canton or Beersford, believe me, we've been hearing a lot about it, but nobody brought that issue up. But thanks again. South Dakota, and I tell people this all the time in my area, South Dakota, we're a low-tax, low-service state. And if you want more services, you're going to have to pay higher taxes. So those are questions that we have to make. Federal government keeps spending. South Dakota balances its budget by making hard choices, and we'll continue to do that. Just appreciate everybody being here, and thanks for the opportunity.
All right, well,
Go state.
Had to get it in.
Go Coyotes.
that's beyond the time limits. So we would like to extend our thanks and our deep appreciation to the legislators that are here on the dais, but those that are not here as well and serve our state. I have great respect for the dedication and commitment that our elected senators and representatives bring forward in this process, and it is a huge commitment of personal time to do this. So thank you so much, and let's give them a round of applause. And thanks again to our sponsors, the Sioux Falls Area Chamber of Commerce, the AARP, the League of Women Voters, and the Sioux Falls Education Association. And again, thank you to Southeast Tech for hosting us here in their auditorium, for the USA Media crew for their work, and for our volunteers that make this all possible. And especially thanks to you that gave up your Saturday morning to come ask questions and listen. So thank you. Okay, we have one coffee left. It will be on Saturday, February 29th at 10 a.m. right here in the same spot. Districts 10, 14, and 25 will be here. So thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.